Welcome to Cut the Crop, keeping you in the know about everything you grow. Researchers, growers and other interesting folk delivering insights and information on topics ranging from agronomy to profitability. Brought to you by the Foundation for Arable Research.
Hello and welcome. I'm Alison Stewart, your host of Cut the Crop. And today we're talking with Allister Holmes. And as you know, Allister is a senior researcher at FAR, based up at the Northern Crop Research site. And Allister is sort of like morphed into a new position with FAR, and he's the Technology Research and Extension Manager. So we're going to find out a little bit about what this new position is. So welcome, Allister.
Thank you, Alison.
Yeah, so tell us, what's involved in this new role and how did it all come about?
Well, I guess part of my previous role since 2014 was around technology and precision ag and digital tools and things in the arable industry. And in the last couple of years, I've discussed with FAR the opportunity to change the way I work, and it was decided that a good opportunity would be to really embrace that technology, tools and technology type area, and really get stuck in that respect. And what it's done is it's allowed us to highlight projects of value in that area, and also work with other researchers within FAR to really see how their projects can be helped by using tools and technology that have often been add-ons to the project rather than integral parts of the project.
So give us some specific examples of what we're talking about.
Well, I think there's a number of things within FAR that we have around software, computer-based tools. So we've been doing a lot of work with Amazing, which is the maize nitrogen calculator, and making that a more user-friendly tool. It came out, I think, in 2008 on a CD back in the day. And
do we know what CDs look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I played a cassette the other day, so we're going back. But so the challenge with anything, and using Amazing as an example, was it was developed on a CD, and then the CD was printed and sent out to growers. And within months or years, we wanted to update the program. We identified a bug, and that would cause a real issue around version control. So probably 2 years ago now, we made the decision to go away from having it as an installed piece of software and have it as a web-based tool, which required changing the coding. So effectively taking the program, the coding language that was underlying the software, and changing it into a web-based tool. Now, that has advantages in the fact that you can access it from anywhere in the world. You've got access to the internet, whether it be on a PC or more likely on a tablet or a smartphone. But it also allows us to update it and change it on the go without having to reissue CDs and get people to update their software. So that's a good example of one tool. And we've got other tools in the suite that we're looking to develop that sort of approach around. Another thing that growers will probably have noticed is we've changed the way that we're reporting weather information and weather records. So we now have a tool that was developed in conjunction with Hawk Plus in Hawke's Bay, where we have an interactive map and people can effectively point to their nearest weather station, and that will give them weather records up to that date. There are some gaps in that map at the moment, but we're working with Hawk Plus to fill in those gaps with weather stations. And that then has brought on the opportunity with a real-time weather reporting system, is actually integrating that real-time weather records into other tools. So we're Amazing at the moment, we're developing a linkage so that Amazing will pull actual weather records into it rather than using 20-year averages. So the value will be for growers that they'll be able to see the real situation in the given season rather than the situation based on on an average basis. And since we've been talking about that, we've had other members of the FAR team who are very interested in integrating that into pest and disease models. So the opportunity is that once we have the ability to use real-time information, that it can inform a whole range of different decision support tools. So that's one example that we're working on, which I think once we get the first run on the board with the Amazian integrating, it'll branch out into a whole range of tools and abilities there.
So, I mean, obviously decision support tools is one area. What about, though, in the whole more precision ag space? I mean, what is our involvement going to be in that space? Well,
something I'm really passionate about in the precision ag space is using the tools that we already have. I went to the government release of the Agtech policy the other week at Zespri in Mount Maunganui, which is all very interesting, but they're pushing advanced robotics and things like that, which are all very well and I think will have a place. However, we're lucky in the arable industry. We already own machines that have a lot of tools that are in the precision ag space that are able to help growers add to their bottom line. I mean, we've talked about profit and loss maps using yield monitor data, and that's one. So a lot of these machines are recording every second. So I'm really passionate that we use the tools we've already got rather than chase the next generation. And I think certainly from New Zealand's scale of things, it's probably a better place for us to be maintaining a watching brief in the world rather than trying to forge our way ahead in the arable industry. It might be different in horticulture and it's something like kiwi fruit where we are the market, we are the world leaders in it. But in arable, I think we have the opportunity to learn from Europe particularly and North America.
So, I mean, one of the challenges that FAR has always had in the past is, that there are commercial companies out there in the precision ag space and the decision support space. And, we're challenged about, well, why is FAR, sort of like cutting across the commercial ventures? So what's your answer to that? What's the value that FAR is bringing to the table that is different to what a commercial company is trying to do?
Well, I think the big thing that any organisation like FAR brings to the table is that we're colourblind, and we will look at the tool or technology that's best suited to that grower's need, rather than going out with a set suite of products and tools and encouraging the use of those. And we do have the situation where there's a whole suite of different tools. I mean, a case in point is ProductionWise. I mean, FAR has the ProductionWise platform, which is a very valuable platform and an increasingly capable platform. But then there are other commercial tools that carry out similar functions. The question is, should a grower embrace one of them or all of them? I don't think anybody will embrace all of them.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of embracing one and doing it really well. And I think certainly something I've found with growers is that they tend to pursue the system or work with the system that is linked with their leading machinery supplier. So obviously if it's a John Deere system, they'll be using Operations Centre and so on. So I think that's something where we have the ability to look across the tools and not worry about whether it's a John Deere planter or a case tractor or what have you. So I think that's a value. And to be perfectly frank, some of the manufacturers have made it quite hard for growers to interact with machines.
Yeah, I mean, that was the classic business model, wasn't it? 10 years ago, is that everyone wanted to have a unique software platform so that it would force their clients to always use, their system. But actually, they've all recognised now that the best thing is to be as interoperable as possible.
That's right, and that's right. I mean, a rising tide lifts all ships, is the saying, and I think that's certainly correct. However, there are still some real challenges in that space. I mean, we're working with one of the leading agricultural machinery manufacturers now about trying to get some data out of their system into another common system that a leading grower uses, and we just can't do it. So far, we've been working on it for 12 months. I mean, part of that is the fact that we're trying to do it from New Zealand. I think if we were sitting in Indiana and growing 10,000 acres, it might be a different story. But it is a challenge, and without being able to access the coding behind these things, you've really got to work with their people who interface. So that is a real challenge.
So what are the key things on your list to be working on this coming year?
Well, I mean, I've written down a list, and I mean, as growers will be aware, I undertook a big sustainable farming fund project, and we've probably the key output of that to date has been the work around the lime spreading, but we're just finalising 2 arable updates or arable extras on variable rate seeding in maize, and the use of profit and loss maps in cropping. So those are 2 big outputs that we're hoping to get finished in the next couple of months. We're also, growers will be aware that in the past FAR's run crop sequence surveys, so where growers have recorded the sequence of crops that they've grown on their farm, and also the tillage techniques that they've used. So in that case, we're looking at the establishment technologies, and we're planning to run that survey again, and this time write it up as a standalone survey, but more importantly, look at the change from 2007 through to 2020 and see what the change has been in the technologies people are using to establish tools, but also the pain points and the challenges in their rotation. So,
which is, when you think about some of the areas around environmental sort of footprints, and cultivation is probably one that has to be looked at in the arable industry. It will be interesting to see how much change has gone from full cultivation to minimum to no-till. Yes,
absolutely. And I mean, anecdotally, we've seen a massive change in the northern North Island in the last 2 or 3 years, and I'd like to say it's because of FAR's research in this area, and I suspect we've had a role, but I suspect the lion's share is attributable to the Waikato Regional Council putting pressure on water quality. So we've seen in the last 3 years it go from being 3 strip till machines in the Waikato to more than 10 strip till machines in the Waikato, and obviously an increased rate of use, and similar in the Bay of Plenty. So you're certainly seeing a major change in that respect. Some of the other regions we've had less change, but that will come under the microscope. And as part of that work too, we're also, I became aware that New Zealand has undertaken reduced tillage work on maize dating back into the 80s, and we're taking the opportunity as part of this work to pull all the data together and interrogate it as a single data set. Which will be interesting to see what that has, and what results that gives us about the use of no-till or strip-till techniques.
So one of the challenges is, for FAR, it's always been that, we do pieces of research, we write it up, we put out an update or a newsletter article, but how do we then get that information translated into on-farm change? I mean, there's only so much extension work that we can do ourselves. Have you got ideas of how are you going to address this issue of being able to get farmers to understand what technology's out there, how it can benefit their particular, farming enterprise, and what the return on investment is, because that's often the issue, isn't it?
Yes.
That yes, it might be a really good technology and it might deliver benefits, but the cost of purchasing equipment or the infrastructure or whatever, it's not necessarily a good return on investment. And so growers will happily spend $500,000 on a tractor, of which they will only use 10% of the functionality.
And it's a real challenge. And I think one of the first things to say is that every farming operation is different, and so there's unlikely to be a cookie cutter type of way to roll out innovation. And a good case in point of the way we've extended this work is in the South Head region, north of Helensville. We talked with growers up there, and one grower in particular was quite concerned about his maize operation. They're on very light sandy soils there. He was on the top of a ridge over above an Auckland Regional Council park, and was highly aware that during cultivation season, if he had rain, he had a lot of sediment loss into the Regional Council park. He was also aware that he was in his mid-60s and didn't enjoy driving the tractor as much as he used to. And so we took that opportunity to set up a on-farm, very simple 2-treatment trial, full cultivation versus no-till. And undertook that, and he, after the first year, we changed the first year we did it, the whole farm was full cultivation except for 4 small areas of no-till. The following year it was the other way around. He did no-till across the whole farm, and we did a small area of cultivation to provide the trial. So that was a really good way. Obviously that's an incredibly intensive way of getting the message across, but what it does do is it provides a focal point. And the first season we ran it, and subsequent seasons, we get local growers to come and visit and talk about what went well, what didn't go well, how it might fit in their system. So we've undertaken trials like that in the South Head region, the Waikato and the Poverty Bay region with strip tillage, and we're in the process of rolling out that sort of work more widely spread around the country. So we looking at doing some reduced tillage work in Canterbury around the vegetable seed production, and also in Southland in the following autumn. So that's certainly a good way of getting it out there. And once you have a focal point, you get farmers in there and you can talk around a crop. It's much easier to talk around something in the ground than an abstract concept on a piece of paper. So I think that's certainly an important way to do it.
So, I mean, a lot of technologies coming through have got cross-sectoral applications.
Yes.
How are we connecting into, the technology innovation that's occurring, throughout all of the different sectors in New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of tools that if you take out the word pastoral and put in arable, they're just as applicable. And I think that's certainly a continual challenge. So certainly keeping up to date with the systems that are rolling out in other production systems and bringing them across where appropriate is valuable. And
do the other sectors have technology, sort of officers or liaison people that you connect into? How do they operate?
The Dairy NZ has a network of officers around the country, and I actually attend some of the events in the Bay of Plenty and Waikato just to keep my eye on how that goes. And Beef and Lamb have a good model too. And they have officers who work with growers there, and they have some networks of growers that work together with the extension agents, which works well. In perennial horticulture, they have the advantage that often the perennial horticulture systems are much more intensive. So they'll have, kiwi fruit is a case in point. They have $1 billion industry within 50 kilometres of Tauranga. Now, it's a lot easier to service that industry than pastoral or certainly arable. So they have, Zespri has extension officers, technology transfer officers who work with growers there. But certainly model when you talk to people who've been in the industry for a long time about the old MAF advisory roles and the AgLink publications and things.
Gosh, yes, I remember those. Yeah. So what do you think would be a game changer technology for the arable sector? Is it something we've already got but we're just not using? Or is it something that you can see, if we had the ability to do that it could disrupt the industry?
I think there are a lot of technologies that we have currently, and I think the one that if we could get right, we could make huge inroads and huge increase in profitability and a huge reduction in environmental footprint is around site-specific crop management. And as we've talked about in the past, it's simply a matter of applying the correct inputs to your paddock for the yield that you're going to achieve in that field. Case in point, in the season been in the 1920 growing season in the Waikato, a lot of growers would have been aiming for 25 tonne crops of maize silage who would have achieved 12. So there would be equivalent of 12 or 13 tonnes of dry matter inputs having gone into that paddock that are now lost. So obviously that is a huge financial cost, but it's also a loss of inputs. So I think we have the ability to do that technologically wise. At this stage, I don't think we've got enough enough people who can help implement that. So obviously our leading operators are some of the best in the world, but there's a lot of people who are sort of on the fringe of that technology because of the challenges we've talked about at the start around integrating systems and getting your fertiliser spreader to talk to your tractor and satellite imagery to feed down in a timely manner, and all those sorts of practical challenges that, to be perfectly honest, can do your head in. So, one thing I've talked about in previous podcasts is I use AgLeader SMS software, and it's an incredibly powerful piece of software. But the reality is there's probably 1,000 hours where you achieve virtually nothing in order to learn how to make that software work for you. And the reality is very, very few arable operations have the ability to throw 1,000 hours at a problem before they get a return out of it. So whether there's a place in the market for a middleman, so to speak, I don't think it's realistic that we can see or expect every grower to embrace this technology because of the scale. And this is the same as what I've seen overseas in the States, Canada, Germany, the UK. Growers tend not to embrace all the tools, but they'll work with a middleman or a third party who will be an expert in that field to make those tools available to them. And as you touched on before, there are a few commercial companies in that space, but it's a very small number of people who are in that space at the moment.
So if you look at arable cropping, overseas in the UK and Europe, even in Australia, where do we sort of sit with respect to, the uptake and utilisation of the latest technology? Are we up near the top?
I think, the first thing is it's really hard to get a handle on exactly what percentage of people use which technology. So there's been a number of surveys carried out in North America since the 90s on the uptake of precision ag, and they can map certain things like the uptake and the use of auto steer and the uptake and the use of yield monitors very easily because they track machinery sales. But that doesn't take into effect that often these yield monitors record data but nothing is done with it. But beyond that, they become estimates very quickly. How many people are practicing variable rate fertiliser use and how many people are using imagery to help manage crops and things. So I think if you compare the data that we got out of some work that the New Zealand Centre for Precision Ag did a few years ago now, we were as good as anyone in the world. I think you could say we're as good as, but we're also as bad as. And I think we've talked about this before. I kind of expected going to North America in the Midwest that everybody would be doing everything because it's the hub of cropping in that system and they've got such large scale, but the reality is they've got the same problems on a larger scale. And so what you see over there, and I've seen in the UK, and you talked to Jim Wilson when you were in the UK, and I was lucky enough to visit a massive operation in former East Germany, which was exactly the same, was where I've seen operations where you have a single farmer who's absolutely passionate about using these technologies and realised the opportunity was to go from being a farmer doing it on their own basis, but to really embrace that and bring in other farmers. So their farm will form the basis of engaging GIS specialists and agronomists and people who can read the data, work with the growers, bring in technologies there, and they develop businesses out of it. So I think that's certainly an opportunity, and we see the same here. Same thing here with Craig McKenzie and AgriOptics. It's pretty much the model that happened there. So that's the opportunity. But I think that's probably a better way to get precision ag tools especially digital tools, into New Zealand cropping, rather than ever expecting every grower to embrace it. It's two reasons. One is scale, and the second one is passion and interest.
So there's only one of you.
Yep.
What's your focus going to be? Because obviously, there's a lot of identifying, new technologies.
Yep.
There's a lot of doing some validation work of technologies in a New Zealand arable situation, and then there's a whole load of extension work.
Yes.
You can't do everything.
No, that's right. I mean, the extension work is I think, we're all getting our head around extension and FAR and how that might look. So, I'll certainly be visiting different areas and talking with growers and at field days about it. But I think also we've got a greater interaction between other FAR staff and myself on technology and how it will work in their projects. So that's been a good step forward. So we're trying to get more engagement with the agronomic research and the tools and technologies that can feed into and add value to.
Yeah.
To those tools.
If FAR doesn't do it, how can we expect the growers to do it?
Well, absolutely, and I think FAR's in a unique role, in a unique position, because we don't have a commercial barrow to push. We're for the good of the industry, and if that means we're going to work with blue, green, red, whatever, so be it. And so I think that's a real strong point there. But I think, as you say, it's very easy in any sort of technology field to always chase the next bright thing. And I think that we really need to pull back and look at the tools that we've already got and we've already paid for to get them going. So, swarm robots are a concept that fascinate me, but I don't think they'll be on the ground globally in the next 5 years, let
and
alone
certainly
New Zealand.
not at a cost that would be suitable for our growers. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes the simplest, small change can make a huge difference.
Yep.
And sometimes, chasing that bright, shiny thing, it's fun, but it's not necessarily going to deliver, extra dollars in the back pocket of the grower.
I think that's right. And I mean, if you look at all the sort of technology tools, probably the one that's offered the greatest return on investment has been auto steer, because growers can reduce their overlap. They can drive straight lines, which is hard at the end of a long day, so they can match their pass widths, and the estimation is that saves around 10% of fuel and labour, and also it's a lot less fatiguing on the operator. So it's looking at some of those tools that we already have in place and maximising the benefits of them. But also, we're very lucky with obviously the internet now, is that we can keep a watching brief on everything. I mean, the one that's, I must admit, is kind of surprising me is how slow autonomous tractors are in coming to the market. That we have autonomous motor vehicles on the road, but we operating in a highly regulated but rapidly changing environment with a lot of people, and therefore huge legal risk, as opposed to a tractor.
Six-lane motorway.
I know. Yeah. Whereas a tractor, you're going to put a tractor in a paddock that's quite often surrounded by drains and there's nobody within a mile. The potential for that to go wrong and
do you not think that's just because growers really like driving tractors?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because we met with a guy in the States in February who said that he'd really struggled with the uptake of reduced tillage technologies because the growers love driving tractors. Yeah, possibly, but I think Case and John Deere have had autonomous tractors for coming up probably nearly 10 years now, and I don't think they've ever gone beyond sort of experimental and proof of concept paddocks, and yet we have Teslas and Google cars that are driving autonomously currently. So it's a bit of an odd one.
It's because people like driving tractors.
That's right.
It is.
Yes.
Great.
Could be.
Lots of interesting things there, and I'm guessing you're going to be pretty busy over the next year. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's great to be able to narrow my focus a bit and target some of these things. And as I say, I mean, I've got a note down here about updating machinery costings. I mean, I think understanding the actual cost of running your machinery is a critical part of this. So there's some things that we're going to revisit that we've done before. So being able to narrow that focus down and look at and target certain projects is a good opportunity.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks very much, Allister.
Okay, thank you, Alison.
And thank you, listeners. Have a great day on the farm.
Thanks for tuning in to Cut the Crop, presented to you by FAR. If you'd like to know more about any of the topics discussed or have any suggestions for future topics, go to www.cutthecrop.co.nz.